Paul Baum Recreation Commission appointee.
Thank you, Charles.
Charles Phillips, Housing Authority appointee.
Thank you, John Kratzley. John, you're muted.
John Kratzley, Select Board appointee.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah Grimwood, Natural Resources Commission appointee.
Thank you, Andrew Boardman.
Andrew Boardman, Planning Board appointee.
Terrific. And Burton Flint.
Burton Flint, Select Board appointee.
Thank you. And Eve Eisenberg. Hello, Eve, you there? You're muted if you are saying anything. We can't hear.
Here I am. Sorry. Eve Eisenberg, Select Board appointee.
Thank you. And Diane Proctor, Select Board appointee, all present and accounted for. Hooray. Well, good evening, everybody. This has been a busy 5 days for the CPC in terms of our suggestion at the last time we met of taking some money and trying to move it into with an expediency that would allow the CHDC to begin to act, of moving some monies out of our out of 5 different buckets into our housing reserve fund, and then moving that into an additional fund. Well, it ended up that what Burton and I both thought was going to be easy as pie turned out to be remarkably complicated. And the bottom line is that money is going to be moved to us, to our housing reserve, but it's not going to be moved anyplace else. And that's the final conclusion after lawyers and select board all weighed in. But in the meanwhile, we've had a chance to do quite a bit of research, and had we, and I think specifically I, done this research in advance, we might be in a slightly different place. So I'm going to do something rather unusual. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to ask you for a certain amount of patience while we listen to a 5-minute talk by an expert in housing, affordable housing, and affordable housing trust funds, municipal housing trust funds, and their relationship with the CPC. Is that all right with everyone?
Certainly.
Because I think we will find ourselves much better informed. So here we go. Share a screen. And of course, I'm about as good at this as you can imagine not, but I will find it. Don't worry. There's a way to do this. I'm not seeing my, I'll try this one. Does this do it? No, I don't. That's not it. Hold on just a minute. Okay, I've now lost you all. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, all that matters is that you can see my screen, and we'll go from there. Okay, here we go.
We can't see your screen. We just see you.
You need to share your screen.
Hi, I'm
wait.
Tim
Okay,
Kihiko
just a
with
minute.
Lowell Real Estate.
We can hear though.
Well, you really kind of want to see what she does.
Okay.
Hold on just a minute, please. I'll try again. Now I will share my screen again. Now can you can see me, right?
Yes.
Now I'll share my screen. And I don't see, it's ridiculous. I don't see the,
We were seeing your screen. We were seeing your email screen previously, but then it went.
I know, but that's not what I wanted you to see.
Okay.
It's very frustrating. Just let me try this and see if this works. And then I will go, I hope I don't lose you. I'm going to go over here for a minute. And now if you can't see my screen again,
We can see something about Ukraine.
well, can you see something about Lowell?
No.
Experts, and you're about to witness a peek of what heaven looks like. Introducing this elegant 2-single-family attached house, built by a renowned builder from Eastern Europe in the 1980s. This
These things you
luxurious
should put-
place covers
Oh, maybe this is it.
4,378 square feet,
There we go.
with
Now you see
remodeled
it?
bedrooms and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
first
Okay,
unit.
we can skip
and
this
floor.
ad. I guess we're not going to be able to go to heaven. Okay, this starts on, I had it all fixed up and now it's not. So just take me a second to get there. Okay, here we go.
Here, so
Oh, and once again,
hopefully they'll be here soon.
it bounced back. So let me go back up again.
Take center stage for good reason when it comes to climate policy. Lots of
Right,
people
this
vulnerable
isn't
to
it.
heat, lots of people getting can really have.
Oh, jeepers.
Here, so
We somehow have happened on the wrong.
hopefully they'll be here soon. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to MHP's 15th Housing Institute. As you just heard, we'll be recording.
All right. I'm recorded something very specific and now it's not showing up. So let me get out of this room. Let me stop sharing. I'm going to do one more thing. So stick with me for a second, please. I'm sorry to take everybody's time.
Let me know if it's something I could help with, Diane.
And if you could pull up that Affordable Housing Trust video that you sent me. Okay, now I've got it up on my screen again.
Hi, I'm Tim Kihiko with Lowell Real Estate Experts, and you're about to witness a peek of what heaven looks like.
What do you all see? Do you see me or do you see the screen here?
To see you.
Okay, well, that's too bad. Let's do something better than seeing me. All right, now let me share my screen. And this should be it.
What heaven looks like. Introducing this elegant.
So we get to
The
Miss Heaven
municipal
again.
schools.
And we're going to go to, there we go.
Okay, so I'm gonna get into some ways that Housing Trust and CPC's Community Preservation Committees are collaborating and or suggestions for your communities as well. I guess I could say that we have about 115, I think we're up to about 117 or 18 affordable housing trusts in the state. And with this past election, I forgot to check the number for sure, but we have CPA communities. We have so many CPA communities. Does anyone know the number offhand? More than half of the communities in the state now, well over half of the communities in the state have CPA. So we have good coverage across the state of both entities. So one is that when we talk about the trust identifying housing needs, the local housing needs, this should not be done in a vacuum. It should not be just the trustees of the trust determining the needs. That this really should be a community-wide engagement. The CPC should absolutely be involved in this. So you don't want the CPC learning about the housing needs in your community when the trust comes to the CPC asking for funds. So a first suggestion is that if you're updating your housing needs analysis, your housing production plan, or any kind of housing, doing any kind of housing analysis, that you make sure that the CPC is engaged in this, that the city council or the board of selectmen, that it's not just the Affordable Housing Committee, the Affordable Housing Trust, the Housing Authority, but that it's a broader process and that the community can also be engaged in that. So there's a baseline understanding of some of the key housing needs in the community. We see that there are a variety of ways that CPCs, community preservation committees, and trusts work together. And the CPA, one of the key things is the CPA can fund the Affordable Housing Trust.
And this is really important for us because we have to figure out how specific an application needs to come to the CPC in order to support the Community Housing Trust Fund or in order to transfer funds. So that's the reason we're watching this with particular care.
So in some communities, the trust is expected to apply for a specific program or a project. So they apply to the CPA, the CPC, in the same manner as everyone else for a specific program or a project. And then the CPC reviews that, decides whether or not they're going to suggest that project for funding. The second is that the trust, in some communities, the trust can apply for CPA funds for no specific purpose, but to have in their account to be able to move nimbly if a project comes up so that they just have funds there. A third way is that some communities transfer a set percentage each year, and that's generally determined beforehand. And that it may not require an application at all, that the CPC just puts that on the docket of what they're recommending. And that goes to either the city council or the select board, town meeting, that it's a set amount. So it's important, it should be established early on of how are these entities going to operate in your community? How might the CPC fund the trust? So in some communities, Cambridge, they're transferring 80% of their CPA funds every year to their Affordable Housing Trust. And this has been their pattern for, I think, since the beginning. So they really use their Affordable Housing Trust as the community housing arm of their CPC. All housing funding questions go through the trust. In Somerville, their CPC has been transferring about 45% of their funds to their housing trust. So I think developers can still go to the CPC for funding, but the idea is that most of the funding decisions for housing is done through their trust. And then Grafton is an example of a town that essentially transfers 10% of their CPA funds to the Affordable Housing Trust on a regular basis. And there are other communities that are doing something similar as that as well. But we talk about grant agreements all the time, as well as for those of you who engage with Stuart Saganor at the Community Preservation Coalition, that we urge communities to be diligent in having grant agreements whenever you're distributing any public resources. And this includes transferring funds from the CPC account to the Affordable Housing Trust. The funds can still be given to the trust for broader purposes. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific project, but you really want to think through, are there any restrictions or expectations that you have for these funds, or how soon they're used, how quickly they're used? Sometimes funds sit in a CPC for years, housing funds, and they don't get used, and then they might get transferred to a trust, and then they just sit there and they don't get used. So you want to make sure that there's, even if you're not transferring the funds for a specific purpose, that there's some idea that that the trust has done some work around knowing what the needs are in the community, having an idea of the kinds of projects that they're wanting to fund, that they have some sort of plan, some guidelines. Because once the funds are transferred to the trust, if your grant agreement doesn't specify the funds being returned to the CPC if they haven't been used in 5 years or 7 years, then the trust doesn't have to return them. So if the CPC has expectations that their funds are used within 3 years, within 5 years, within 7 years, you should write that in the grant agreement. If the funds are for specific purposes, that should be specified in the grant agreement. If it's for broader purposes, you should specify that as well. Try to think ahead, try to anticipate, and put that in this agreement. And that goes for the trust as well. If you have expectations, make sure that that's outlined in the grant agreement so that down the road, there isn't a dispute over the purpose of the funds.
Okay. There's much more very interesting information in this discussion, and we will send you the link so you can watch the entirety of the hour and a half if you're so inclined. But go back to Eve, you're laughing at me, or go back to spot 44 and follow through in a little more detail. Now, I just want to point out that we do have already an agreement with the town signed on July 20th, 2021, a grant agreement for non-town projects that we signed with the CHDC, Concord Housing Development Corporation, in order to allow them to do certain kinds of building. Again, this is so interesting because this is not how we were advised the other day. Again, without having to be tied to very specific projects, as long as the agreement read that this money would be used in the future and no funds would be released without specific information being offered. So in other words, that would then put the burden or the onus on that specific information on the organization that holds the money. So if we choose to transfer our money, which if the warrant article passes in January, if we choose to move our tranche of money from Concord Junction Village to the our reserve fund, which is what we've asked in our warrant article, then we should have been able in a second warrant article to then move that even in undesignated ways, even though we could have designated it as for the Assabet River Bluff project, funds to be identified once, funds to be released only after specific, project details were presented. We could have done that, but we were ill-advised. We were told we couldn't do that. So the bottom line is we are now in a situation where the second half of our warrant has not been accepted. So it's only the first part. And going forward, we have an opportunity now to transfer that 1 million, 22,000, 77,000, whatever it is. I don't have that piece of paper in front of me right now. We can transfer that money to the Concord Municipal Affording Housing Trust Fund. And they can then, if we can be very specific, we can say for use for the Assabet River Bluff project, monies to be released once specific designs for that money are presented, so that we would work kind of in collaboration with the Concord Trust Fund. So had we known all of this a few days ago, we might be in a different situation right now. But the bottom line is that we can get this money to the trust fund, and that money can then go into use starting July 1st if the town accepts the warrant issue and if everything is voted in the positive, because it will depend upon that. So does anybody have questions or comments based on that, Paul?
So could you explain the detail of, you said specific information has to be presented on what projects, it sounds like another application out of sequence of sorts. What has to be presented to us for approval before the money is spent?
Yeah, not to us, Paul. But we would say that, we can put any constraints or strings on the money that we pass the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund that we wish. And that's something we have now discerned that we can do. But it doesn't have to be, which is what we were being, what people were asking for, very specific design specifications, very specific design issues. Now, I should say that the way that it was worded on that second warrant article was not to put the money in the fund, but to put the money in to Carrie LaFleur's under the town manager's auspices. And that was, I think, in fact, and all in retrospect, I'm not criticizing anybody, just collectively, it was an ill-advised move. We could actually have moved this to the fund, to the trust fund, but we didn't know that. And so I'm not trying to go over backwater. I'm just trying to lay groundwork Paul, for what needs to happen ahead of time.
Okay,
Now,
so
then,
just
the Concord Municipal Affording House, we're just going to call it the trust fund, okay? The trust fund can then put exacting expectations on the CHDC's application for affordable housing. And, you know, that can be, we need a certain amount of money to clear land. We need a certain amount of money to dig pipes. We need a certain amount of money to help a developer have an interest in this property.
I see. So the CPC is not involved in that second step.
We would not-
The only specifics that we put on that is it's directed at Assabet Bluff project.
That's right. And we would
Okay.
ask that we would ask for being constantly updated and informed, just as we did with on the Right Tavern with the Historical Commission. And we said, you know, we need to be updated. They need to approve things. So it's not that we abdicate our responsibility as much as we transfer it to a place that has more liquidity in terms of funds than we do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Burton.
Thank you. And my understanding is actually we've got really two options for the second phase. What we heard was maybe problematic under the Community Preservation Act, and from the perspective of the Select Board and the Trust Board, was allocating money without much of a specifics around a project. But if CHDC came to us with an application that said, this is what we're going to build, we could also send the money to CHDC. If we think that that would not be feasible for CHDC in the timeline that we have in front of us to come up with the specifics on the project, you're saying, well, we can put it in the trust instead, which will hold the money, which can be dispersed as needed, but with additional direction from us. And what that direction looks like is something that we need to sort of sort out over the next weeks. Maybe that is a grant agreement with the trust, as we just saw in the video. Maybe it is a something like that. And for people may be wondering, well, we've already received all the applications for this funding cycle. How do we do this and give the trust money? That was pointed. We raised that point with town council, and they said that application deadline is for the committee's benefit. If under these circumstances you wanted to allow for another application, that would be acceptable under these circumstances. And so this could look like an amendment of the CHDC's application. It could look like a new application / grant agreement to the trust.
Absolutely, Burton. And so the question that still is unresolved is whether the CPC can initiate its own warrant article to say we want to transfer the funds to, or whether the trust fund has to give us a warrant article requesting those funds. And that's something that, you know, the logistics of that, you know, we still have to work out, because at the present moment, and I don't think we still know, do we?
No, I mean, according to that video, it could be an application for something specific, or it could be an application for something that's not specific, both from the trust or the CPC could allocate a certain percentage. But it didn't say sort of the option that we're possibly looking at, which would be to allocate a certain fixed amount of money for this one-time transfer.
I think it did. It said that if we've got a housing trust fund, and we do a reserve fund, we can transfer it to someplace else, and we could put any of the provisos on it we wish to. The question is, who has to initiate it? Do we have to initiate that, or does the trust have to initiate it? And I think we're going to need legal advice on that. At the present moment, CHDC is not inclined to expand their application or to put in a new application at the present moment. They are reasonably discouraged by some of the decisions that have recently been made from Junction Village to what happened for this warrant article business. And so I think they're retreating for a little bit and trying to figure out exactly, you know, what they want to do. So we'll continue to be in conversation with them if that's okay with the committee.
I don't really fully understand the ramifications of the warrant and the town meeting yet, but I have two questions. The first one is why do we need to say it's for Assabet specifically if we're asking for project information before disbursement? Couldn't it just be what the video said, and it's basically a you know, directing some of our funds directly to that organization without any kind of stipulations, except that before dispersing, we need to see some more information. And then my second question is, what happens if it's not approved by the town?
Oh, then the money still sits with us. It doesn't go anywhere. We're still sitting on that $1 million. You know, Eve, we don't have to make a suggestion that it go to the Assabet River Bluff project, but I think because it's a project that we've already approved, it's a project we've already supported, it's a project we've already vetted. It makes some sense, if we choose to have that money transferred with an understanding that it would be used. It would not be it would be an understanding that we would create with this, with the trust, so that they would then be able, when they disperse the money, when specific details and designs were before them, so that when they were dispersing the funds, it would be used for the Assabet River Bluff project. And that would be essentially an understanding, a memorandum of understanding between us and the trust. And we don't have.
So it's to define our relationship with the trust, not to restrict the housing commission, not to restrict Lee at all.
In fact, Lee's organization is bypassed entirely. He then has to go to the trust fund and ask for money. And in order to ask for that money for this project, should we choose to say it's for the Assabet River Bluff project and its ongoing development, you know, as specifics are made available, and that's kind of the language that we think we would use. Then it's really, you know, up to then that transfer takes place, and then it's up to the trust to work carefully with CHDC to make those funds available as rapidly and as smartly, as intelligently as possible.
Okay, and I'm sorry, just a quick follow-up. I don't mean to dominate, but
no, I mean, it's complicated. It's taken us, I mean, Ann and I have been at this for 100 hours, and Burton, who was wonderful and stepped in when I couldn't be there. So there've been a lot of us involved in this. Go ahead.
That's awesome. The video was talking about understanding the housing needs and the will of the people, more or less, with regards to housing needs. Have we done that already? Is that available?
Well, there's a housing plan about to be presented to the town on the 17th or the 15th. Hold on just a minute, of November. Got it on my calendar, so let me get it.
Can I quickly say that somebody who is unmuted, there's a lot of interference that seems to be coming through.
Okay. The housing production plan will be presented in a public forum, a public hearing on the 15th of November.
Thank you.
And that's an update. I believe the old one is 5 years old, and there is a first Friday that the league is offering this coming Friday at 10 o'clock from 10 to 11:30, in which Marcia Rasmussen, Keith is going to give some background for people who don't know what happened with Junction Village. I will very briefly explain this move that we're trying to make, or what we've done, or what we hope to put before the warrant and why. And then Marcia Rasmussen is going to be speaking about the new housing proposal, which has essentially been managed by an outside consulting group. And there have been public forums and everything. So, Charles.
I just want the bottom line. I'm not hearing it. If the warrant article that we submitted passes in January at the special town meeting, we are then getting those funds back into our reserve.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
In addition to that, the CHDC has a warrant article in the regular town meeting, which will give them $100,000, I guess.
That's right.
Then the question is, that money that's in our bank account in January, well, or is it available in January if it gets passed at the special town meeting?
That's right. If it
Is it
gets
available
passed at
right
the
away?
special town meeting, then it's in
So-
our Affordable Housing Reserve Fund.
We'll get it, we'll get it. What, then, can we, independent of town, a meeting, transfer, if we wish, some of that money to the trust?
We
Yeah.
cannot without a warrant article. It has to be approved. It
We
has,
cannot, so there will be another warrant article which would have to, yeah, we would want to prepare that for the May town meeting.
that's right.
Correct. You got it.
Okay, I got it.
I'm sorry if I've been confusing,
So
Charles.
that
I didn't
means
mean to
that,
be. I probably
that
jumped
means
into this.
that in any case, the CHDC isn't going to get any money in their hands until July.
That's right. And
And
then
I think that's kind of sad. I'm sorry that it didn't work out.
we're all very sad it didn't work out, Charles. We share that. We share that dismay. It would have been better if it had, from our perspective, just because we would love to be able to see affordable housing, up and running as soon as possible, for the people who need it and for the health of our town. Thank you for that very good comment. Andrew.
So the boards that have community housing minimums or whatever set up, we have 10% obviously as part of the policy.
That's right.
It sounded like the communities that had funded them at 90 or 45 or whatever percent had long-standing traditions of the board does it on their own volition because it's the written policy of the committee. And what we're saying is that we don't have something like that, but it's an option. But the beneficiary of that, which is the CHDC, isn't going to submit an application.
Well,
to
Lee
do
Smith
that,
is
right?
on the line and we'll see what he has to say, Andrew. What I do know is that we have a commitment to 10% affordable housing, 10% historic preservation, and 10% open space. And that has been our standard understanding with the town.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's,
no,
that's
I understand that. I'm just,
understanding. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering, do we have as a town, and I'm new here obviously, have we ever pushed a large amount of money towards this like this in the past? Or
Well,
is
we
it just,
did
are we just saying it's an option that we sort of have in reserve because it's legally permitted?
That's fair. It's a wonderful question. We did last year. We put $1 million toward essentially open space and affordable housing, which was a disproportionate percentage of the money that we had.
Andrew, do you mean, have we just banked it like this previously?
We have just banked it. Yeah, okay, that was my question.
Well, we've banked smaller amounts in the hundreds of thousands when we are undersubscribed or have wanted to balance out. Let's say there's a year where there's not a big conservation, land preservation, or a housing element. We tend to keep these things, notwithstanding the 10% floor, at around 30%, and so we've made contributions to those funds, and knowing that when housing opportunities and land acquisition opportunities come along, they generally exceed our budget, and so it's nice to save for those.
No, that makes sense to me. I was just curious of how it's been handled in the past. I know that it's been banked where we say, okay, this is going towards affordable housing when we get an application that's, whatever. But I just wasn't sure if we've taken a step farther and made that decision for them and push the money out.
It's a wonderful and appropriate question, Andrew. And in fact, that's the reason we have the $1 million, is because we put those dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in consecutive years aside for Junction Village. But then that project, an affordable housing project, was not forthcoming.
Right, it's slightly different, but I do understand what you mean. Yes, mine's a slightly distinct point of not holding the money ourselves year after year, which makes sense based on, but actually affirmatively assigning it to a third party with conditions that they haven't asked for.
we have yet to make that kind of move, although we're obviously entertaining how we might do this now. I'm going to go to John first before I go to Lee. John, don't unmute, hon. Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
I'm just puzzled. I gather the advice you got was that we could not have a second warrant article to move the money. 10 minutes after the first one passes, we couldn't have a second one in January to move the money to the trust fund.
And not only were we given that advice, but Mina Macarios and some people in the town planning office, and Linda Escobedo's on the call, so she might be able to help us with this, conflated our 2 warrant articles into one. And go ahead, Burton, you want to take
Yeah, and John, I think frankly, there was that as a result of this process being very much rushed, there were people that had questions that weren't able to be answered in the time frame that was in front of them. What ended up happening was at the very last minute, literally with about 5 minutes before the warrant closed, a new revised version that combined the 2 articles into one with modifications that were made by town council was circulated. I think town council probably was operating under the assumption that there would be time to consider this. That then single article was presented to the select board after they had already considered the first article. Apparently, I was not in the select board meeting, but apparently confusion then resulted, and they decided they were not in a position with the information they had to move either the combined joint article drafted by town council or our second article. And I think that it's just unfortunate, and there wasn't the time for anybody to get a straight answer on what was happening. Town moderator suggested that as drafted as well, with it just going to the town manager, the funding going to the town manager, that would not have the support at town meeting of either the select board or the trust board. And so she advised that we're really in a better place. We're delayed by 3 months, as Charles pointed out. That's unfortunate, but we would presumably have time to get our ducks in a row and have the support of those 2 boards as we proceed.
And that's beautifully put, Burton. I would add that as people are saying 3 months, it's really 6 months. Because had we been able to free up the funding, that would have given CHDC, 6 months to already start some things on which they now have to hold themselves in abeyance. Lee, before I call you, I just want to make sure, Linda, do you want to add anything to this? Because I saw you appear.
Yeah, thanks, Diane, but not at this point in terms of how the conversation has gone. Thanks.
Okay, all right. So we haven't done any, we've represented it fairly so far.
I think so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lee.
Hi.
Can
you hear and see me?
Yes, we can see you. Fantastic.
All right. Well, I just first want to thank the CPC for their support and encouragement and attempt to advance the Assabet River Bluff project more expeditiously. It's not the end of the world that it's not proceeding as we may have liked. Some things to keep in mind are that the trust has over $1 million in its coffers right now. We've talked about, and this has all been moving very quickly, but we've talked about focusing on getting one of the vacant units in the existing structure on the SHI, which would require some renovations to the building that I think we've got available funds from a combination of the Housing Foundation as well as the trust that we can draw on between now and July 1st, when any future CPC funds might come available. So I think that's fine. And it'll take longer than we may have liked for the other 3 new construction units, but again, not the end of the world. So we'll do the best we can. And, we try to advance it more quickly, all of us, I think collectively. And that's just not the will of the deciders at the moment. And so be it. And we'll be fine.
Well, that's very gracious, Lee. Thank you. So now our challenge is to try to get that money from our coffers to the trust fund. But in order to do that,
Which,
we
if I could just add, I think CHTC is also fine with the funds being in the custody of the trust. And once that happens, we don't need further town meeting action to release those funds.
That's right.
And, you know, my only concern was, and I think I raised this at the last meeting, was whether, you know, what level of involvement CPC wanted to have in overseeing how the funds were being dispersed. And that's, you know, obviously more of a concern for you folks, but obviously, you know, I think the trust certainly has the same intentions in mind, and we can involve everyone in the discussion as decisions are made and specifics are laid out, and that's fine.
That's wonderful. That is such a gracious way of responding, and we thank you so much. So our challenge now, our task is for us to meet with the trust together and get some legal advice as to whether this is a warrant article we move or whether it's a warrant article that the trust fund moves, and then figure out how to make sure that that money gets to the trust fund. So that they can begin using it on July 1st. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, can I hear some thoughts either in opposition or support before we go on? I mean, we're not voting on this yet because we need some counsel and advice as to how to proceed, but are there residual questions? I'm sorry, I threw us in the water in the middle of the stream and then we went back and found a canoe. But in the meanwhile, I hope it's reasonably clear. John.
I take it it's up for us to decide whether it's in our overall warrant article where we give away all the other money, or is it a separate warrant article? That's an open question, I gather.
We're just going to need some legal advice, John.
Okay.
I think it would be, my sense is it would be in our regular warrant, but it would be another item on our warrant.
Yep.
Now, whether that's something we move or whether it's something that, well, we just don't know. Do you know, John? Do you have an instinct for this, or Burton, do you?
I have an instinct, because if without this, we wouldn't be hitting our 10% in our regular warrant article towards affordable housing. So the risk would be that we pass our regular warrant article, and then this is a separate warrant article, which would get 1 million questions asked being separate. And if that didn't pass, then we would be below our 10% threshold. So assuming we're not told otherwise by town council, I would advise that it be in our regular warrant article.
Yep.
That's what
I
my
agree.
hope is too. I mean, that's what my fantasy is. I've had several over the last 5 days. Some of which have proven true and others haven't. Yes, Andrew.
Yeah, I would agree that it would probably be better to be part of the regular warrant article because it would stand out as more appropriate. But as part of that, it would seem to, in my mind at least, be better if it was actually in response to an application as opposed to the board's volition just simply because it's unusual, and where you're talking about what will probably be the largest single amount of money moving on the warrant for us to do it unilaterally without anything supporting. I mean, there's support for it, obviously, but without any of the ordinary documentation, it would just add more questions at town meeting. That's my only thought.
I think that's quite prudent, Andrew, and I hope that's how all this can work. We now have to involve the trust in moving on this. And I think if they can make an application for that money, it would be terrific. So we will see. We still need legal advice, and we still need to have some time before our next meeting to get this in play. Okay, next on our agenda. Review of current applications and any new material received. Is there any comment on the existing applications or concerns about the existing? Oh, wait, Lee's on, but just a minute. Applications. Lee.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask if you need me for any other part of your meeting.
I don't think so,
All right.
Lee. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I'm happy to participate in whatever matter comes up, and we'll work it out. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. I should add that Delia, I presume, is going to withdraw her application. And
Oh,
this gives us one moment to discuss the Hillcrest application, which has not gone forward. And it's not gone forward for a variety of reasons, but I'd like to turn to Paul for some discussion of that and then a general discussion. If it had gone forward, Andrew and Paul would have had to recuse themselves, and we've checked this with counsel, and that would have had to happen. But since it's not going forward, Paul, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the importance of an application from citizens as opposed to a town application. You're muted, Paul.
Thank you for the opportunity to jump on my soapbox here, but before I do, is Delia modifying or withdrawing the application? The last discussion was some part of that was going to survive.
It's very hard. We have not heard from Delia. So my sense at the end of that discussion was that she was going to withdraw it because there was so much that relied on and depended upon a public hearing, which wasn't going to be able to get organized or happen before that. So I will make sure that we connect with Delia, obviously, as soon as she is ready to, and hear where she is on that particular proposal right now.
Okay. On the other topic, so I don't want to discuss the Hillcrest application specifically because I have to recuse myself, but it is an example of something that I want to talk about. And you won't be surprised because I've talked about this before, and that's getting more upfront community involvement in probably all of these categories, but especially recreation and open space, and to some extent the others as well. And it's interesting, the video that you showed us on housing really emphasized sort of upfront community involvement. And so I think that translates to the other categories as well. We don't get a lot of applications from either community groups or from individuals. And so I've been asking myself why. And I don't know if I really have the answer, but I think that a couple of things I've observed, that there's not a widespread understanding in the community that, you know, the CPC, that ideas can percolate up into applications. I'll get into the process in a moment. So that's one thing, that there's sort of an awareness, I think, that's lacking. There, as much as we think there is a clear process, we try to insert that into the plan. There's not a clear process. I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. And I think at best it's an uneven process across the various stakeholders and departments, and it can be an unfriendly process. I don't think the Hillcrest application was a friendly process, and in part because the applicant got started too late, and in part because the department and the commission took umbrage in that, and for good reason. I mean, there's planning needed up front, but I think that it's incumbent upon the town departments to actually encourage and support those applications from the community. And, you know, if the advance notice rules maybe have to be bent a little bit, you know, so be it. And, you know, there are examples in the CPC where we bent some rules for the benefit of the community. And, you know, I can give you those. I want to get into those. There are a bunch of them. I think the note from the NRC, I kind of put the lid on that application. In retrospect, maybe that applicant should have been heard, and then we could have counseled the applicant that enough advance notice wasn't given. What was surprising in that NRC note for Sarah and others is this kind of 6 month.
That's right.
The 6 month rule, which took me by surprise, took everybody by surprise. And
I think you're talking about the application that you said you would need to recuse yourself from.
Yes, he would recuse him, from which he would recuse himself. He's talking he's talking about the process, Anne, I think, about, you know, how is it that that individuals can do this kind of thing. One of the things we heard from the NRC was that such an application needed to be done 6 months in advance. Well, that wasn't necessarily something in writing anywhere that of which people were aware.
Well,
So
and that's part of the process, and the rules are uneven. I'll give you a specific example. So I got in touch with Beth Van Duzer about the Civil War monument because I understood in conversations that she was late to the knowledge that she had to involve a town department, and in fact, she did, and the town department signed the application, but that was 1 week before it was due. So there's a case where there was some collaboration and it was a valuable project, and it got done in pretty short order. I'm not saying that's going to be the case with other departments, but I'm saying that, there's a variety of rules and unwritten rules, and I think it's incumbent upon us to kind of straighten that out a little bit and make those a little bit more friendly. So my point here overall is not to dwell on any one application, but really that I think going forward and starting the next cycle, we need to encourage more ideas and more involvement and more applications. We didn't have a lot of applications. I think there are ideas out there from community groups, from committees, from individuals that really need to be encouraged. And one important facet of this, we have an informational meeting that takes place pretty shortly before the applications are due.
That's right.
We might think of something, as long as it doesn't interfere with our process of getting the warrant article together, much earlier in the year, because if indeed the NRC and the other departments, if they need advance, time, then applicants should know that, and they should know that, they got to get these ideas presented early on, and they're not going to know that with an informational meeting right before the application is due. So
this comment is really important, and I think one of the things we can do is to invite Carrie LaFleur to a meeting later on in the, once we've got our warrant article nailed down and all the details, and talk about a process that can be made more transparent so that people who are not part of the town government process know how to make an application or know how to involve themselves.
Right.
It's also possible when doing public forum. I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I want to mention one other thing. There's a perception, I've heard that, I've seen it in social media, that the CPC can be a bit of a, I don't want to be pejorative, a slush fund for the departments, that, that's a way of funding for the various departments, and it's hard for individuals to kind of sneak in there. That's not true, but the perception is that that there's an inside track for town departments because they do advanced planning and they know that the sources of funds are there. So I think we need to kind of guard against that. And also, finally, we do have a newspaper, so maybe we can use the newspaper to get more CPC awareness out there. So with that, I will I recuse myself from further soapbox. Soapboxing.
It's good. You've made very, very good points, Paul. Thank you. Anne, and then Sarah.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify with the Beth Van Duzer application. She was representing the Civil War Task Force Committee, which has been working with the CPW all along very closely. And she, as we learned at our site visit meeting, she's been working on that for 8 years with the DPW and the task force. I
know that, but she told me she wasn't aware she needed to have the department as the applicant until a week before the session. You're right. It's a different situation. Okay, it's a different situation.
Yeah. I think you pointed out something that's very important, is making the application process to the broader community absolutely transparent and apparent. And we can do that through the newspaper. We can do that in lots of ways that we haven't. We can also use the bully pulpit when we're doing a public forum, and send people to certain sites, if we have it well cultivated and developed, that says, if you're interested in, blah, 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 here's where you look to see what kind of advanced work you need to do, underscoring advanced, advanced and preliminary work you need to do. So that folks are aware of that, because I think you're absolutely right. I don't think people always know. And it's important for us to be aware of that, because we have worked very hard as a committee to be connected to the community and not to isolate ourselves, and to really listen to community voices. So this then becomes this reinforces that, Paul. Sarah.
I really like the idea of using the Bridge newspaper. I think, you know, that provides a forum where we can, you know, explain what the CPC is and give out plenty of notice for this sort of information. Also, just as an NRC member, I do feel I want to balance out the comments a little bit by just stating 2 points. I don't want to debate. I just want to state that the group who put in the Hillcrest application they did discuss with Delia a year before that they were going to do this, and you know, she made it clear that they would need to work with her, and so they did know, and also that the proposal was on town land. So you know, the commission and the town does have a responsibility to make sure that this was approached in a careful manner.
So
That's
this
all I
is
wanted
not
to say.
private land, and we're not going to debate, as you said, that issue, and this is
Yeah.
not what we can do right now, but those distinctions are important. And it was on town land as opposed to private land. And I think one of the things we've looked at over the last couple of years, actually 3 or 4 years, we've actually seen some private land applications for the use. And so just making sure that everyone understands how CP funds may be used is important. Charles, and then Nancy.
I just wanted to second Paul's discussion, because the Hillcrest application really was, I mean, is something most of us didn't even know about at all, and it really is a needed project. And I think even though they didn't really understand that they had to go through the NRC, and which is because it's town land, an application like that, I think should raise perhaps the interest and the involvement of the town to do something which some citizens very much need, and the whole town needs it. So I'm glad they applied, and you know, I hope that that by working through the NRC that something like that will actually be accomplished.
Thank you, Charles. Well, we're not discussing the Hillcrest project, but we are by indirection. But Charles, those are wonderful comments. No, wait, Nancy, you had your hand up first, and then John.
This is part of a bigger conversation, and to make it a bigger conversation, I'd just like to say that the format of the application itself can be daunting in terms of all the criteria that have to be addressed one way or another. But in the criteria, I think it's explicit that the knowledge and assent of the owner of the property being proposed for improvement or whatever, that's one of the criteria. So some of this is just getting the experience.
That's exactly right.
You know, some people dive right in and they go a lot faster than other people. So I just think the whole application process could be simplified a little bit. So it was so much easier to look at applications that address completely and fully, with fully developed projects, what the proposal was all about. And some of our most successful projects, I'm speaking in terms of historic preservation, have been ones that have been phased. And so everything doesn't have to happen over that phase.
Well, I mean, these are all the kinds of things that could be pithy parts of a nicely written article for the Concord Bridge. About how phased operations, what their effectiveness is, you know, how early one needs to do this, the nature of the application itself. Something we can look at this spring. And I'm not sure we want to make it too less complicated, because we want to make sure we're, you know, covering all the details that it covers. But Nancy, I think it's well worth reviewing.
Well, I just think it's extraordinary to look at the difference from a 3-page application that's extremely important that we all know all about, to ones that are, you know, over 10 pages. And
right.
So there's a great discrepancy in how people are responding.
And how people understand how to respond.
Yeah,
So in that article, we can put examples in as well. I mean, not 10 pages, but we can refer people to an application online. So, John.
Yeah, I'm concerned that if we have even if we have a May or June intro session, it's less than 6 months till the application's due. And I don't know if the NRC would consider changing their 6-month rule, because if you learn in May or June that you have to do it, you'll be already under the deadline
That's right.
to get it. So that just looks problematic to me.
Well, it's worth a good discussion with the NRC about that, John. Sarah?
Delia was given 2 days to review and she was out of town. That wasn't reasonable. Certainly the NRC will consider, more time and not with us with a straight 6 months. We want to be reasonable. We want this project to happen. That I think that was just laid out as a typical example of a good amount of time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the kind of clarification, Sarah. Thank you so much. That needs to be out there. And it's really through the collaboration that we do with various committees, which is why it's so invaluable, I think, on this committee to have people from the different areas, from housing, from recreation, from the Natural Resources Commission. I mean, all of these things, really enhance our discourse and enrich it, I think, importantly. We need to review, already to go forward? Yes, no, maybe? All right, let's review an evaluation of the criteria for each application for funding. Anne, do you have something you would like to show us to do that review, to expedite that review?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't. I was so busy working on the warrant article and the plan and the project summary and the timeline that I did not.
Okay, well, I hadn't heard of one, but I thought, well, maybe I don't know it.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that'll be up at our next meeting then, Paul.
Yeah, I have a question on the status of a couple of applications.
Good, that's what I was hoping. Thank you.
I'm sorry, we talked about Delia's Waters Pond application. We're waiting to hear from her. The other application for the plan, I think at the last meeting we asked for some additional detail information. So we're still waiting on that, I assume.
We're still waiting on that.
Okay.
Which one are you talking about, Paul?
I'm talking about the open space and recreation plan update.
Yeah.
Right, from Delia.
From Delia, I think there were a lot of comments that we would like some more detail. I forget all the comments. She was taking notes as we spoke.
Yeah.
Well, and as exquisite, thank you, Paul, and as exquisite as the application was for the Civil War monument, there's also a lack of specificity about how the money is going to be spent, specifically in what areas and what kind of needs will they have. The applicant made a comment that, well, I just put a lot of money down figuring it was going to cost a lot. I thought, oh, you actually have to be a little more specific than that. So we are working with her to make that application, as beautiful as that application was, a little more fiscally specific than it presently is. Nancy, you had that's a hum. Do you have something? Yep.
Well, isn't that going to be known when they do the RFQ or the RFP variously described? You're talking about the Civil War monument, right? So they're relying on a successful proponent.
A successful
those real specific things, but I'm sorry, are we going off on a tangent? Because isn't Daedalus the company that did the description? That was one of my questions, because there's a lot in there about what this might look at, but it wasn't clearly said if that was the Daedalus people.
That's exactly it. So, I mean, there are just some clarifications, aren't there?
Yeah.
We need clarifications there. We need clarifications from Delia.
Yeah, that's fine.
On 2 projects, actually. One which we presume she'll withdraw, and the second one in which we presume that there'll be greater clarification in detail. And I think she understood that during our conversation. Paul and then Andrew.
Yeah, sorry, I have a bit of a tangent. So on the 10% minimum, we've kind of discussed that in the context of housing. But I'm just wondering if we put $1 million, if our warrant article eventually has $1 million added on, which is additional to the housing that's in here, and if Delia brings down her request, are we going to be under the 10% for open space?
Well, there is
Recreation?
no mandate about 10% for open space. There's an understanding in the town, but under the legal relationships, the other three have a mandate for 10% and the presumption 10% for recreation, Paul. But
No, I'm talking about open space.
open space, yeah, we are. I mean, that it's going to be a real problem. I mean,
Yeah,
we're going to end up. I mean, that $1 million is, as far as I'm concerned, invisible, because it's not going to be $1 million that we had to spend and then put over, for the Aspet River Bluff project. I mean, that money is on a second layer, as it were. Our given $2 million this year to try to determine how we're going to use it, we're going to be under in many categories. And so once we see all of those fleshed out on a chart, I think we're going to see that we're under on our general commitment to recreation. We're under on historic preservation. I think we're going to be under in a variety of categories, including affordable housing, which is an interesting irony, because CHDC is only applying for $100,000. They're not upping that application. And
yeah, no, my question was, so CHDC is not upping that application as we discussed at the last meeting.
no,
And then I had a question. Also, we had discussed at the meeting, Marcia had provided a lot of detail in her presentation about how she was spending the money. Is it standard practice for her to supplement her application?
it
with
is.
those details as well?
It is. And Anne, I'm sure, is taking notes on this, but that means that we need to hear from the Civil War Monument, from Marcia, and from Delia, greater specification in all three areas.
Right.
Thank you for that, Andrew.
I think Delia was contemplating, I recall, separating her application to retain the consulting fees that might be used as part of a plan rework or something, but we would again need more specificity. So it might be a withdrawal, it might be a change.
That's right. We just have to wait to see, because right now that's not part of what she's doing.
Okay.
It might be prudent for her to do so, because she's going to need consulting efforts on the Warner Pond. Okay. A review of the voting process. The voting process is usually pretty straightforward. Each application is reviewed, and then it's usually by majority, but almost always has been by overwhelming majority and consensus. We've rarely had, in my experience, any kind of negative reaction to any of the applications. And so that will go forward. If not at our next meeting, let me just quickly, on the 29th of November, the public hearing for the CPC is in January, for the regular warrant article. So we have two more meetings, the 29th of November and the 6th of December, to discuss the details of those missing projects and to get some people back. So, Anne, I hope you will invite Delia and the Civil War people and Marcia back to show us rather fleshed out applications.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you. And then we'll be able to put them forward. We can see what percentages. We're going to have to put money aside this year that we're not spending. And when I think of last year, when we were aching for more money, and this year when we're flush, the contrast feels to me a little uncomfortable and a little sad. But Andrew,
wait till next year.
Yep.
Plenty to spend.
That's right. Andrew.
On the documentation side, several of the applications were also really good at letters of support. Some of the applications just had bold statements. These committees support this. It'd be great if we actually had that as part of the record, letters from those committees. And Bruce Freeman was one, and there were a couple others. So
Well, I think so, but I don't think the burden is on the applicant necessarily to produce that. I mean, they can certainly nudge it, but as long as they tell us something that is, you know, honest, and they usually do. You know, we know the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is is approved. For instance, Marcia's plan. But you're right, a letter of, we can remind people, and maybe
Yeah.
you write to.
I was actually thinking more Concord prison outreach, because
Okay.
I think they had kind of committed them to spend some money. And so I
Yep.
just wanted to make sure that was, they knew that and were.
They knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nice to know that. So Anne, if you could help to remind people to get letters of support.
Right, I think they have until November 15th.
Yes, they do.
So I will do that. Okay.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that the public hearing where each person presents and members of the public ask them questions, that's on January 6th.
I'm looking to see if I have a January 6th. January 5th. It could well be January 5th. I don't have that in front of me. Anne, do you?
Yes, let me see. Sorry. Oh, we don't have a meeting set up for January yet. And so that was actually one of the things I wanted to run by you all. So we've proposed January 3rd for the proposed meeting date, and the warrant closes at 4 p.m. on January 4th.
Well, usually, you mean for us, a meeting?
For us, let's see.
You mean for CPC?
For
Or-
CPC.
Yeah, our recommendations.
I mean, we can certainly review them. We can certainly meet briefly on the 3rd of January and just confirm, you know, what we're doing. But I think I believe what John is referring to is the public hearing for the normal town warrant.
No, I'm referring to a meeting that we held. I remember holding it at an elementary school where each person presented their application and members of the public asked questions. And that's different than the warrant public hearing.
Gosh, John. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do have that November
We haven't had
15th.
that for a very long time, I don't think. Does anybody remember doing that last year? Or the year before? Or the year before that?
No, because we were virtual.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't even remember. I mean,
I do. I remember, not last year, but that the public has a chance to see preliminary recommendations right before we submit.
Right, sorry, and we do have a public hearing scheduled for November 15th. So coming right up.
November 5th.
November 15th. And that's the same day we'll receive funding distributions from the state.
Oh,
we have a public hearing?
We've always had one year after year
Yeah.
when the public was able to hear from each applicant and then ask questions. And it was before we voted any specific numbers to anybody.
Well, that's crazy, John. I'm sorry that I don't remember that. I have a public hearing on the 17th for the special town meeting. But I
I mean,
don't.
we can waive it and just not have it, but we always used to do it.
Well, I don't remember doing it last year when I was chair, and so if it happened before that, that's wonderful. I'm not conscious of it. One of the problems is if we do it on the 15th, that's also when the housing production plan is being presented.
Were you
No.
saying November 15th?
November.
That's 2 weeks.
That's right.
We don't have complete and we don't even have the complete applications.
I think I don't think it's a good idea to do it on the 15th. We certainly can try to look, John, and see. I don't know that there's anything in this year's applications that would, usually my experience, at least last year, and I can only speak to last year when I was the chair, it was at the public hearing that people came up and commented on each of the various proposals. And there were people in the room who represented them. And if people had questions, then that stimulated discussion, and then it came back to us, or it came back to other, in other directions. Now that I remember very clearly. But I don't remember having an individual public hearing, but that each application is presented at the public hearing, and that each application has been presented sequentially and logically throughout the fall and vetted by various discussions.
Well, the public hearing that you're mentioning, who conducts that? And
The town
is it
does. The town,
because the warrant article is ready?
that's right. And that's when I would have to get up, and I know I've seen people before me do this, get up and present each of the articles in all their detail for commentary and for discussion. And that public hearing is unusual because not all towns do this, but it's a very important part of the way Concord behaves as a town.
Let's do it.
Is that the finance committee public hearing in March?
I guess the finance, it's before, I believe it's in January. It's certainly not in March. That's way too late.
Too late.
Does anybody have it on their calendars? Because it's oh, Linda, hello, thank you.
November 30th, it was held last year. And
There you go.
the office prepared a slide presentation that you worked through each of the proposals.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was called a public hearing. And Linda, does the select board also have a public hearing or support a public hearing at the same time for warrant articles?
We just added it to our November 28th select board meeting, prior to the select board meeting.
Prior to the select board meeting, okay.
So,
Well, this may be brought to us by FinCom. Is it, Linda?
no,
FinCom has a separate one on the
Okay.
17th, and this will be for the select board.
Okay, so we have one on the 30th of November.
Last year, that was the date last year.
Last year. So we could do it on the 29th.
We could,
Right.
shall we? What do you think? Okay,
so it is on our calendar for the committee's working year for November to prepare a press release for public hearing on applications, conduct a public hearing on applications, and review the finance director's report on the status of the CPC fund account.
okay, so let's plan on that on the 29th. Do we want to do it at the townhouse or do we want to do it virtually?
Townhouse.
Townhouse?
I vote for townhouse.
Anybody have an opinion on that one? John, does this work for you?
Yes, fine.
Hello, John?
Yes, yes,
This works
go
for you?
for it.
Okay,
Yes.
Escobedo, your hand is up again. Wonderful. What is do you have a comment? I don't think so. So, may I hear a motion therefore that we have a public hearing on the 29th of November at the townhouse? Oh, wait, now Linda's hand is up now. Linda, do you have something you wish to add? Nope, hand went down. All right.
So moved.
Okay.
We have a public hearing
Thank
at
you,
the
Nancy.
townhouse on applications on November 29th.
All in favor?
7 o'clock.
Second.
Paul,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Eve,
Yes.
Burton,
Yes.
Charles,
Aye.
Andrew,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and I as well. It's a unanimous, I so declare. Okay, so a public hearing on the 29th of November, which precedes our meeting on December 6th.
Yeah, perfect.
Questions we have. Okay,
Diana, are we gonna do anything special to get the word out for that public hearing or is? since
well, first of all, we'll have to go on the town calendar.
Yeah,
Release.
And I'm sure Ann will, and then we can put something in the Concord Bridge, a press release from Ann's office to the Concord Bridge, reminding people of that CPC hearing and an opportunity for the public to review
Mhm.
those applications.
that'd be great.
Required to do a legal ad for that.
Right.
And I think,
Go ahead.
I think the bridge is set up to do that. I'm not positive.
They are the legal notice of the town.
Yeah.
I just looked up the Concord Community Preservation Committee 2022-2023 timeline, and it does say November 15th on there. So maybe we should either take that down or fix that so the public is not confused, because I'm confused about when this hearing, it says public hearing for all applications on Tuesday, November 15th, 2022 on there.
Okay,
Woo.
let's take that down and let's put it on the 29th.
Will you be holding a meeting on the 15th or? you'll set that date?
Yes, we're going to have to, because we're going to need to review some applications. I mean, we still have some pretty serious work to do. Okay. D. Ortner. Oh, good. Oh, hand down. No, hand was up. No,
Yep.
hands down. Oh, here she goes.
Okay. Hi, I'm
Hi.
wondering, I just have a couple questions. And John, maybe I was listening to what you were saying about how we used to do things. And because John and I served on the CPC before.
Right.
And we used to have meetings that the applicants would come and present. And we did that over maybe 3 different meetings. And the public was there too. And if, anybody who wanted to come to our meeting was there, so they could ask questions at that time. So
Right.
that was one way that we handled it. Another thing though, I'm just wondering if the meeting, and I think that Anne just said it was on November 15th. I'm wondering if that is for special town meeting.
That's what I thought, but I think the public hearing for special town meeting is on the 17th. And the 15th is the CPC, the housing production plan. At least that's my understanding.
Okay, so it's on the 17th that you're saying.
That there's the public hearing for the warrant article for the special town meeting.
Okay, all right, I just wanted, so you are going to be doing all of your articles at that meeting?
On the
Or
29th?
when, on the 29th is when you're planning to do your articles that are going to be heard in April?
That's right.
Okay, okay, I just wanted clarification.
No, I mean,
Thank you.
That apparently is what we're doing.
Good, thank you.
I so remember doing this in January, so I'm so puzzled. But I'm sure my puzzlement will evaporate as soon as everybody else tells me how wrong I am. I just so remember doing this in January. Linda, can you help me with this? Aren't there always public hearings in January in advance of the town meeting?
Yeah, in the past, because of the date of the town meeting being as early as April, they started in January. They may start a little later this year.
So, so this is a kind of ad hoc CPC public hearing. This is not the regular public hearing.
No.
Yeah, it is.
It's different. They're different.
They're different and they're not.
They're 2 different events.
They're 2 different events. That's what I'm saying, is that this is a kind of brought to you by the CPC as opposed to brought to you by the town.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, never mind.
And I do remember doing it twice last year, but that is now coming back to me, so we'll be just fine. And we're going to do it at the townhouse rather than virtually, and that's what everybody wants to do, right?
Yeah, November.
All right.
29th.
Well, we have to make sure, Anne, that we have the townhouse and that we have this set up and that it can be filmed and all the other things that go with that, okay? And make sure the townhouse is not being used that evening for any other purpose or reason that would prevent us from being able to do it. And then we should probably get a notification of this out by at least by the 15th.
I think we need to do it earlier,
I do-
in order
I
to
do.
get the legal ad into the paper on time.
That's exactly, so that's the reason, and remove the other one on the 15th. So when I said at least by the 15th, as early as possible.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Excuse me, we're going to have a regular CPC meeting on the 15th.
Yes, we are.
Okay,
Yes, we are. And the group that will be invited to attend that are Delia and the Civil War group and Marcia. Unless they want to submit their completed applications in writing, I think they should come and present them to us in person. So that if we continue to have questions, we can ask them, Paul.
thank you.
Okay. And one of the problems with gracefully aging is that one's memory is not always as absolutely crystalline as I might hope. Okay. Okay, now the schedule for 2023. Anne, can we see that?
So this, I think that there may be things that are missing here, because I'm learning and I was basing this off of last year's schedule, and the person who is also scheduling all the other meetings for the town, she's also new to scheduling for the CPC. She did the HTC and other committees, but not this one. And for those committees, there are sort of fixed dates, but there are very few committees that, at least that, to my knowledge, that are so tied into the rest of the town cycles. So this is what she had so far. So January through June, and then for the fall, the fall schedule sort of echoes this fall schedule. And I had suggested maybe leaving a little more time after the applications are received to evaluate projects for their eligibility, just their basic eligibility, whether they have the property owners consent, that sort of thing, rather than have such a quick turnaround time to, try to set up site visits like the weekend after the applications are received.
So you're giving us 2 weeks rather than 1 week.
Yes.
Okay.
So you may all want to take a look at this.
Well, you kindly send it around ahead of time. So it's a good thing to review right now, but I believe we probably all read it.
You're flipping those dates of the 15th and the 29th, all right?
That's right, right. And some of these dates, the public hearing date for November 15th had been set up, long ago, long before I arrived, but we'll fix that.
Back to our earlier discussion in the spring, one of those spring meetings, we may want to think about an informational session, or whatever we're going to call it, an awareness session.
Mm-hmm.
The 28th, maybe in March. I don't know what other business we may have then, but we should think about that.
You mean like the March 28th date?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the other business we have before us at that time, but
We probably
something
won't
early.
have a lot except to close out any projects. I mean, only if that's the case, Paul. We often don't have a meeting then. Because
Yeah, I mean, so ideally time for ideas to percolate, to applications to percolate, to coordination with town departments.
And that does give people a full 6 months. And if we use the Concord Bridge and other things to use this as an opportunity to promote and discuss CPC, that would be a very good thing. So let's try to do that on March 28th then, okay?
Okay.
does anybody else see anything? We don't have to meet in all of these regular dates. We only meet if we need to for one reason or another. But the March 28th, I think, is very important.
What it does create is a big gap between March 28th and the next one on August 16th. I just don't know whether you want to consider that June meeting.
Well, we have a meeting date in April if we wish to use it. And another one in May, John, that
Yeah.
we could use that are, way before.
Yeah, that's what I'm only thinking of. I don't know if people are ready to talk to us in March. And they might be much more interested to talk to us in May.
Okay, let's see. If we did it in May, June, July, August, September, October, that means they don't have 6 months to get an application in.
Okay.
So I think the reason, I believe, Paul, I don't mean to speak for you, but my understanding is the reason he wanted it when he did is so that we can get things out there in advance for people to be able to start doing their planning. We could do it both times, John, actually. You may be.
Yeah, I'm not sure ideas would be fully ripened by the 28th, but at least we can kind of prime the pump.
Yeah.
If I can combine lots of metaphors.
And then again on May 16th. I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt to make public information public twice. And in each one, I mean, the kind of thing I'm thinking about is a case study approach. This is a project that really worked, and here's the information, and here's how it got started. And here's another one at another hearing that really worked. So that people who didn't want to attend both, it's all going to be a little bit fresh and new. But I think establishing some case studies would give people a tangible sensibility for how the CPC works. Does that make sense to people?
That's a great idea.
Okay.
I don't think it needs to take up the whole meeting time either.
Well,
Right.
we may not need to meet for any other reason, Nancy, but these could be 45-minute meetings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can imagine. Yes, John. Let's see. Oh, hand down. Okay. All right. Would you send those out on an email form and to everybody? So those decisions can be reviewed with an understanding, if you don't mind putting on that the public hearing date, the revised public hearing date.
Great.
Okay. And then a reminder that there will be another public hearing on the 17th that precedes the one on the 29th, and that has to do with the special town meeting.
And what month? I just need clarification on that. Which month are we talking about?
November 17th, there is a
November
public
17th.
hearing, and that has to do with the special town meeting.
And that's for CPC.
As for was not just for CPC, it's for all the warrant issues. So I presume middle school building project will be the major one.
Okay.
And we are but a hiccup, a little comma in that discussion by comparison. And then on the 29th, our own kind of homemade public hearing.
Right.
Okay, everybody, does that make sense so far? Good. Okay. I didn't see any project updates right now for 22-23, Anne.
They're there. I can bring those up.
Oh, could you? We've been so busy that I looked quickly, but I didn't see any project updates. So let's see.
So this was as of September 30th.
I
So-
did. No, wait, let's not get ourselves in a mess again, because we've done this before. I meant by project updates, I mean, any projects that are already existing that we needed to update proposals that were already to be considered for next year were updated. And I didn't see any of that. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so can you explain then what a project update report is?
So I'm sorry, I'm still getting used to this whole committee and what your the way you described various reports. So I'm not sure what you're asking for right now, but I do have the summary of all of the projects that are active
Okay,
currently.
that to me is different than a project update, but I can see why you thought that you would use that language, and now I understand what we're doing. So this is a summary of all the projects so far and where we are financially, right, Ann?
Yes.
Okay, you want to run us through that just a little bit, please?
Sure. So you'll
Can you
see,
make this a bit larger, please? Could you? Thank you. Great.
okay. So this was as of June or September 30th. So I did the first quarter. And unlike the past, I lumped all of the housing projects together, the open space and recreation projects together, and the the historic preservation projects. And then within those categories, I organized them by the project itself, rather than in the past, it was all organized by the year that the application was received. So I think you get a better picture of what's going on in which category and which specific project. So this has the 4 Junction Village projects where the funding is now being reappropriated. And all of those funds will now go into the Housing Reserve Fund, assuming they're supported by the special town meeting. So there are, several where, the projects haven't really begun yet. You'll see there hasn't really been any activity. You see all of the Aspet River bridge projects are together, and there's the $1 million land acquisition project you were just talking about with Aspet River. And then the status reports, maybe those are the updates that you were talking about. Heather Gill had, flagged them a green if the reports were received over here. And all of those have been uploaded to the website. So if you wanted to look at individual project status reports, they're all available on the website too. So there are just quite a lot of open projects, and I'm still familiarizing myself with many of them. There actually, since I've arrived in the last 4 months, there really hasn't been very much activity that I've seen. It's been with the Wright Tavern, with I think it was the Masonic Corporation. Those are the ones I've seen. Whereas with the town projects, I don't always see the activity, because a lot of them are approved in advance, where the purchase order is reviewed as it arrives, and the purchase order is for a large sum of money. So I review it and Paul reviews it, and then those funds are sort of earmarked in the purchase order. And then once that purchase order is approved, I don't see the funds moving around like individual invoices, but we can request them and they would be submitted to us.
And if you could just go down a little bit further on that. So if we look at the Warner's Pound dredging money, you can see that we have allocated $750,000, $75,000, and how much of that has been actually spent? Of the 500,000, it looks like 496 has been spent.
No,
No. So the 496 and the 250, that is unencumbered and unspent.
Unencumbered and unspent.
Right,
It's-
so this is
it's the one
encumbered,
in-
these are in a PO, this has been spent, so the 56 has been spent.
Has been spent, okay. So in other words, there's $750,000 in unexpected funds on the dredging of Warner's Pond.
Correct. So. This will always be up on the website, so whenever you have any questions, or, you know, you can go through it in detail and ask questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
And where is this on the website?
It's under current meeting documents.
And in looking over this chart, you probably studied it, quote unquote, studied it more than we have. Are there any unspent project amounts that are mysterious? I mean, they should have been spent by now, but they're not. I mean, some of these are understandable. Projects haven't started, but you know, sort of aged projects where there's a lot of money still sitting there.
Well, there was one under Junction Village.
Right. Well,
This was in the expended column, the $78,000. And so when Liz Rust saw that, she questioned it because she had, you know, as far as she knew, there had been no funding spent on Junction Village, at least not to that amount on this grant. And so I looked into it, and curiously, it had not been given an account number. It was approved in 2015, but it was never, or not 2015, I'm sorry.
It says 2016, but
yeah, but then the account number was never assigned to it, so we tracked that down and corrected it and made sure that those funds are in fact there now. So this is incorrect, that was never expended, and there was still the total 350 here. And that's something I just learned in the last week.
right.
John, do you have your hand up with a question?
Well, I do see 3 accounts that are complete. They're in gray and they have money remaining. One's 2,000, they're all in open space, 2,500, 15,000, and then one closed project with 5. I was just curious if that money comes back to us when Anne marks them complete and then she shows an amount remaining.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Do we get that money back?
yeah.
Yes. So
Oh,
that's
good.
another thing I learned, you know, over the last week, that typically these funds go into the undesignated funds category, but then they're tied up for a whole year for some reason, for some accounting reason. There's some municipal accounting law that they need to be in the books at the end of the year. I'm not really sure why. So they wouldn't become available. If we close them out now, they wouldn't become available to you until 2025 if they went into the undesignated fund. But if you put them in a reserve fund, they would be available in FY 2024. That's my understanding.
23, 24. So is that something we should do right now?
I haven't had a chance to put together all of the documentation to close out the projects yet, because I've been busy with other things, as you know. But we could do that at the next meeting. I should have that. And that's actually another issue I would like to talk about it at some other point. Just for procedures, it doesn't seem right for the committee to have that responsibility to close out the projects. In every other grant that I've received, and I've received, you know, many, you know, at, you know, state, federal, local, and private grants, it's always up to the applicant to create the the final reports and the closing documents, and then it's the granting agency would review whatever the applicant submits or the grantee submits, so that the responsibility really is on the grantee. You know, they're the ones who are saying that this project is closed out, and it's not shifting their responsibility over to the CPC.
But if they have, let's say they say that it's completed, that's still $2,500 sitting there
Yeah.
for Bruce Freeman and 15.5 from the Ride Out Improvement Project.
Yes, that's great. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would behoove us to figure out whether that's true. And if they say it's complete and we know it's complete, but there's money left over, it's really finding the right way to move that into a general fund for next year is really a good idea, I think, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
And the 5,000 too.
And we have this for the Regional Housing Service Office,
Mhm.
5,000. And
then projects that we closed in 2022, you know, that was another, what, 11,000.
good heavens. Okay. That adds up to a lot of money. Would you go to the top of this list?
We need to pay attention to the money. This is a great chart, actually.
Yeah. Can you go up to the top of this again, see if we see any more of these magic yellow blocks?
It's pretty
Oh, no,
amazing.
so it's just the 2,500, 15,000, 5,000, and then this 11.
That's a lot of money that projects could really use to do the kind of good work they're trying to do. So, John.
That
Can't hear him.
here.
So, John, do you have another question?
I'm all set. Good work. Thank you, Ann.
And that's really a
Excellent chart. Yeah, really great. So
I don't
much-
know whether everybody had a chance to read the community preservation plan that Anne has put together that's on the website, but it's very comprehensive and very thoughtful.
Yeah.
And I think we need to approve it. Is there anybody who would like to comment on it or ask any questions? Andrew?
I do. I had a couple of little questions.
Okay.
I'm pulling it up now, but one that I remember specifically was it referenced the amounts that you commit to each area and then went on to talk about the 5%. And by adding the new sentence to specify that a certain amount, it made the numbers not add up anymore. So it was just a thought of whether that sentence was necessary. And I'm going to try to find it now that I've said it. Because I read the whole thing.
Do you want Anne to pull up the document for us, Andrew?
Yeah, I have it here, and it's not going to be that helpful. I don't think to actually read it out loud, but it's the version that Anne had sent over before with the notes from the planning division, which isn't on the website now that I'm looking at it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you could pull it up, that'd be great. Sorry.
Could you pull up the plan, Anne?
Yes, yeah.
With the most recent comments.
And do you know what page you're talking about by any lucky chance?
No. If you slide down, I can show you exactly where it is. And I had a couple of little things too, but I think it talked wherever you added language about 5% for available for the. It was like more clarification, but I'm not sure it made the point any clearer. I think it's in this section. I gotta find it.
Are you sure we didn't pass it already? Okay, never mind.
I don't know. I'm trying to, I did notes on it on my work computer, so I'm trying to pull it up. Which is here, obviously.
Well,
Well, when you find it, why don't you scoot a note to Anne and let her, and we'll vote on this next week. But if you haven't had a chance to read it, the document is beautifully edited and very thoughtfully commented on by the planning division. And I found it both edifying and impressive, Anne. So I hope everyone can take some time between now and our next meeting, which is the 15th of November. I hope you can take a chance, just take time to read through it. And if you send any comments, Andrew, that you have that need clarification, that would be really terrific. Charles.
I just want to say that, that the version I saw didn't have E. Weissenberg as a member.
you're right. I will fix that.
Kind of getting, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I didn't even notice
Good
that.
catch.
We don't notice you, Eve. I was too busy checking the other language and trying to figure out who had edited what.
Thank
Nancy.
you.
Quick question.
Yeah,
And were you satisfied with the way the reimbursement processes sections were worked out in the end? Not all of it's here in this one, but there were some
Right.
processes we weren't following, and are you satisfied with those?
Not yet. No.
Okay,
So
okay,
that was part of the big edit, was to remove a lot of the process part of it, and try to create a separate procedures manual. And Diane had offered in her spare time to go through that with me. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
And-
wanted to make sure what happened to that.
Yeah, and we will do that later this week or early next week and go over those, because that almost is an appendix to the actual plan, as I understand it. Anne, is that a correct statement?
Well, it's another quite very large document, actually.
Right, I understand, but it's not, it doesn't, in any way, it's not an emendation to the existing document.
Mhm.
Right. Paul?
Yeah, I had a question, a comment, and a suggestion. You've answered my question. I was going to say, where's the procedures manual? You've answered that. I had sent some comments to Anne, which aren't included in the document, which leads to my suggestion. I suggest that we all review this and send any comments to Anne, so that at the next meeting we can review that and approve it, because this is kind of no fault to anybody. This is kind of an endless process, and we should all review the final set of comments and say thumbs up, or else we'll have to do this again.
Right.
So it puts a burden on Anne, I know, but if you can it puts a burden on all of us to get comments to Anne, so she can put it in there, we can look at it and then say fine.
Haven't we already done that?
Well, many people have, but we've just seen on a second reading or third reading some new notes or some new points, Nancy.
Yeah, okay.
We don't want to overlook those. Let's try to do this well, and let's try to nail it so we can say done. And well done, John.
Yeah.
No, I just wondered, Ann, if I could get a printed copy next week. I know.
I printed it out and it's sitting here ready for you whenever you're able to.
Oh,
stop by.
great. I'll
Yeah.
pick it up tomorrow. Oh, thank you so much. I'll get it tomorrow. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Okay. And continued thanks to Anne for working on this so carefully. Can we hear a vote to approve the minutes, please?
So moved. Which ones?
Anne, could you pull up the minutes?
I didn't see any minutes to review.
Right, I'm actually, I haven't had a chance to do the minutes just because it's
Okay.
been such a really incredibly hectic week. I'm so sorry.
Can we get Ann an assistant?
I thought there were some old minutes that we were meant to review, no? I thought there was one outstanding set of minutes that we had not approved.
It wasn't.
You know, I can straighten that out for next time.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, Thank you all. I'm sorry this has been such an unusual meeting. I mean, there have been all sorts of pieces and corners of everything, which I hope when pieced together, we realize has a kind of coherence. But it's been a rather scattered meeting by necessity, because there have been so many other details to which we needed to pay attention. When I first was invited to be part of this committee, or volunteered and got selected to be part of this committee, and I went in to sign up for it, the wonderful town clerk at that time looked at me and she said, "Oh, you like to work." And I said, "I'm sorry." And she said, "Yeah, that's one of the committees where you really have to work." So, you know, little did we all realize we really have a lot of work. Fun though it is, because the group is so much fun, but nonetheless, a lot of work. Okay, Linda, can you give us an A or a D in terms of the meeting and how you think we're doing?
I think there are many committees right now, given the dynamics of a number of things that are going on. And I think we're all doing our best to keep up with them and plow through them. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
That sounds like a C+ to me. How does it sound to everybody else? And D?
It's pass, fail, we passed.
Yeah, pass, fail. Oh, I like that.
I would say that I'd be in favor of finding an assistant for Anne. It's a daunting experience, this time of year.
Yeah.
So good luck, and you're doing great, right?
Well, I'm trying.
We're all very grateful.
Already.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say goodnight. May I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Thank you. John?
Yes.
Yes. Paul?
Yes, goodbye.
Charles?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Sarah?
Aye.
Eve?
Yes.
Nancy?
Aye.
Burton?
Yes, thank you.
And I as well, I so declare. So have a lovely evening, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.